Right, good evening. Thank you for joining us. This is Live with Faye. We continue to keep an eye on the farmers' protests to give you an update of what's going on right now in Delhi. There was a fourth round of talks that took place today, went on for 7 hours. During the lunch break, we understand the farm representatives refused the food that the government served them and had their own food brought in from the protest sites, which they ate. It was obviously a sign of the standoff between government and farmers. There was, of course, the Agriculture Minister, Mr. Narendra Singh Tomar, who addressed the media after the talks concluded. He said it was a good discussion. The Kisan unions have put forward their concerns. Interestingly, he said the government has no ego and is willing to consider all of the issues with the open mind. He talked about the fact that farmers were concerned that the new laws would destroy the APMCs. He said the government is considering strengthening the APMCs. The fact that the new laws provide private mandis outside of the APMCs, he said both of these will be equally strong. And the matter of the SDM court, where matters will be taken up. So obviously a lot of this is very confusing for our audience as well. So we're attempting to break things down for you. For now, the next meeting will happen on the 5th of December. And in the meantime, the protest does continue. Let me just take you through some of the important things. Now, there were 3 bills that were passed. Remember, the Farmers Produce Trade, Commerce, Promotion and Facilitation, Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement of Price Assurance, and Farm Services Essential Commodities Amendment. These were the 3 laws that were passed that farmers now demand the government roll back completely. The government obviously doesn't want to roll back. It initially started off saying farmers are being misled. They haven't fully understood the problem, but we understand. In today's meeting, at least, the farmer unions made detailed PowerPoint presentations on what issues they had with these laws. Now, if you want a clear breakup of what's going on, there is a conversation I've had with Mr. P. Sainath. The link is available alongside this conversation. We're having a follow-up conversation today. Mr. Sainath has been kind enough to agree to join us one more time and answer some more questions. So we'll take your questions through this conversation. Mr. Sainath, good evening, and thank you for joining us. I just want to share a couple of points within this document for our audience now. These documents have been public for 5 months. So like I was saying yesterday and the day before that, farmer unions and farmers have had enough time to comb through it and to understand the implications. As Mr. Sainath has been pointing out as well in a couple of the press conferences that he had, I want to put this up on the screen so everybody can see it. Now, one of these laws, as you can see, this is the Trade and Commerce Promotion Law. It effectively allows for intrastate and interstate trade of agricultural produce. Anyone with a PAN card can establish and operate an electronic trading platform. There will be no market fee or cess under the APMC for these electronic platforms. And here's where actually the question arises. What happens if there is a problem? Now, in Section 3 of this law, it says, as you can see on your screen, no suit, prosecution, legal proceedings shall lie against the central government or state government or any officer of the central or state government or any other person in respect to anything which is done in good faith, intended to be done under this act for any rules made thereunder. Now, here's the point. If there is a dispute, and dispute resolution apparently will go to the subdivisional magistrate, the SDM that the Agriculture Minister was referring to. He will send it to a conciliation board, and the decision of that board would be a binding statement. Now, remember, the SDM is a said government official, and there is a clause here saying that you cannot take this government official to court and you cannot take government to court. And if the farmer happens to be aggrieved with the conciliation board, they can go to an appellate authority, which is also a government official. And then there is, of course, Section 15 of the same law, which you're going to put up on your screen. There it is. No civil court shall have any jurisdiction to entertain any suit or proceedings in respect to any matter, the cognizance of which can be taken up and disposed of by any authority, powered by this act. So if it has to go to the SDM, it can only go to the SDM. You cannot take it to civil court after that. Now, the other act, which will also pop up on your screen, is the Farmers Empowerment Protection Agreement on Price Assurance. It also has similar clauses. Now, this one basically talks about farmer agreements with corporate India, or corporates who can come in and make agreements. But in the Clause number 18, same thing. No suit, prosecution, any legal proceeding can lie against central government, state government, registration authority, subdivisional authority, appellate authority, or any other person under this law. Also, in 19, it says no civil court will have jurisdiction over any of the disputes in which the subdivisional authority or the appellate authority empowered by this act has taken a decision. Does this effectively deny these farmers their fundamental rights, apart from many other things? These are the questions that we're asking. Like I said, joining me right now, Mr. P. Sainath, and I've said this before, perhaps India's most trustworthy name when it comes to farmers. There are many journalists who've covered rural India, none with as much, determination in Mr. Sainath. And of course, there's this Pari network, which you should take a look at online as well. Mr. Sainath, that's my first question to you. Do these two clauses in these two laws effectively deny fundamental rights to farmers?
It's quite curious. By the way, that 13 and 15 actually shift down and up. It's 18, 19. And it's ironical that clause 19 in these two laws denies people fundamental rights, and clause 19 of the Constitution of India is about the freedom of speech and expression, the right to assembly, all the things that are good in Indian democracy have come under the same number here, 19. And remember this, it's not just farmers. It's if you go back to the first one of those visuals, please look at the wording. Just look at the wording of that. If you can
pop that up again, Arun, the first graphic plate that you had on section 13.
Yeah. Now, no legal proceeding shall lie against the central government or the state government, or any officer of the central government or of the state government, or of any other person, read corporations, read big business, in respect of anything which is in good faith done or intended to be done. So you are not only granting immunity for what potential crime or for crimes committed, but you are granting immunity for crimes that may be committed in future. Anything done in good faith or intended to be done. So it's just astonishing. All laws have a clause talking about the legal possibilities and potential and recourse. But I have never seen anything in any law as sweeping as this. It is a fundamental dismantling of your democratic right to seek legal recourse. Right? That's one. Second, it doesn't say that only farmers are barred. Nobody can. You cannot take it up in public interest litigation as a citizen. You cannot do that. And they have placed this in both the main laws. After all, the essential commodities one is just an amendment. But in both the main laws, they have put these, it absolutely wipes out legal recourse. And the farmers know that. They know that. So that's the first answer to your question. Second, this is going to happen in every law, in every sector that they bring in. This is going to happen. They have done this. They will be in the labor laws that were passed. See, Faye, you need to ask, why did they feel the need to pass farm and labor laws affecting, 75% of the population at the height of the pandemic? Mr. Modi had a majority before the pandemic, big majority. He's likely to have one for a couple of years after the pandemic is dealt with. But he chose to pick on these. Now, in a pandemic, governments have 1,000 things crying out for their urgent attention, but they brought these laws. The calculation was, why did they do that? The calculation is, I've got these blokes on their knees now. They can't organize. They can't hit back. They're disorganized. They can't travel from Kanyakumari to Delhi. They're not going to be able to, resist. This is the time to hit them. And please notice how many leading Editors, newspapers, channels endorsed that view. I could read out from the editorial saying, this is the time, this is India now has a second 1991 moment. This is the time to ram the reforms through. A leading editor on his TV program said, never waste a good crisis. This is the time to push the next generation of reforms. The government made a very serious miscalculation. It thought these guys can't do anything now. They're all covering at home under COVID or pulverized by the pandemic. Let's ram it through. They rammed it through Parliament. The opposition walked out of Parliament on the farm bills. They immediately passed the labor codes.
Yes.
Please understand, don't divorce these. These are all part of one package. They have absolutely dismantled the bargaining power of the working class. You know, try going on a strike now. Try going on, and the employer can change the working hours. There's all sorts of incredible rights. So they made this calculation that nothing will happen. Oh, incidentally, you said you began this program by showing us the photographs of the farmers refusing to accept government food and making their own arrangements. I'd like to add that the farmers also made arrangements for the policemen who beat them. The langars of the Gurdwaras of Karnal fed these policemen who had used water cannons against people in their 60s and 70s in what has been Delhi's coldest winter day in 70 years, 9 degrees Celsius. And yet the farmers had that grace. So it was, for me, the visual of the month that the farmers were feeding the hands that beat them and the policemen were biting the hands that fed them. It really tells you something about the marginalized sections and the state, and the state of how those relations are today.
Mr. Sainath, I want to ask you about the statements made by the Agriculture Minister after today's talks. Round 4, we understand another round will happen on the 5th of December. I like the fact that media houses have now started to report that farmers made PowerPoint presentations point by point. So this whole narrative of the fact that they are misled is now breaking down, because you have farmer unions who are able to, who are able to understand the law and rebut this law clearly. We have Mr. Tomar, who has said basically that, we're discussing these things. He specifically pointed out that, yes, the SDM court is considered a smaller court. Government will consider giving access to higher courts. He's also said traders, obviously PAN cards are available to everybody. Traders will have to register, and we'll make sure APMCs are strengthened and thereby maintained. Do you think this would be, does this solve or answer or even scratch the surface of the problems we're discussing?
It doesn't do a damn thing towards meeting the farmers' demands. Firstly, Faye, you are making the executive the judiciary. That is outrageous. The executive takes on the powers of the judiciary. Well, in a way, it's exactly how the Modi government behaves even otherwise, right? So you are saying that SDM, or what it's called, the subdivisional appellate authority or whatever, some deputy collector or collector who is, completely a tool of the government, is going to be a judge, is going to be a jury. That is completely insane. That's one thing. Second thing, what Mr. Tomar offered, and which the farmers threw in his face on the first and second day, what all Mr. Shah also offered, essentially what they've offered the farmers in the first 2 rounds is death by committee. Let's set up a committee. It's absolutely death by committee, and you should know that a far greater committee than this exists, which has given an incredible report, a blueprint for Indian agriculture, the Swaminathan Commission, which has lain in Parliament for 15 years without 1 hour's discussion on that report. Now, where are you going to get something more distinguished than the people who, sat on that commission and worked for 2.5 years on it? So you're being offered death by committee. The third, about this PowerPoint and stuff, I have to say, the entire attitude, this when you say they're being misled, etc., it's an attitude of classist condescension. These dehatis, these yokels, they don't know anything. All these urban nakshals and others are leading them on. So the farmers have shown you that they know a hell of a lot more about the issue, as they should, than you and I and the government, because they're the ones who wear that shoe. Yeah. And I think the government made a fatal miscalculation in underestimating the resolve of the farmers. Now, I don't know if people are aware of it, but thousands of more farmers are moving towards the capital city. You're going to have 250,000 people there by tomorrow morning on those 5 centers. They are not about to throw in the towel. So that's where we are. On what is being offered, saying we will strengthen the APMC, it's ridiculous, because it's exactly the same thing that they have been saying about defending their law. They're giving people a choice. Faye, the farmers have made their choice. And they're at the gates of Delhi telling the government what it can do with its choice. They have made their choice. And also, when you say we'll strengthen both, it's absurd. How will you do that? All incidentally, the freedom to sell, which they are touting, the overwhelming share of agricultural transactions are outside the APMC. There is no restriction on the freedom to sell. Farmers have preferred the APMC, right? So it's just ballooning.
Mr. Sainath, obviously this impasse is now going to continue. The farmers seem like they will not back down until the laws are repealed. The government, it still sounds like it believes that these are good laws and it's willing to perhaps consider tweaking a little bit, but is not looking at rolling back entirely. Do you expect at this rate, have you picked up, at least from the ground, that there is a plan to cut off Delhi's supply of food, milk, vegetables? Is that what's going on? Because the highways are closing down one by one.
I don't, again, I think we should not play into this government and corporate media's love for conspiracy theories.
Okay.
There is no protest in this country in the last 6 years that has not been an ISI plot or a terrorist act or a, urban nakshal or whatever. So the thing is, if they are sitting there and blockading Delhi, in fact, what I have heard is how they would make arrangements for essentials, for medical supplies, for those to get through. That's what I've heard. Yeah. So, but it's going to be played this way. Faye, again and again, I tell you, you have to look at how closely, not just government, but the elite establishment, even when saying, oh, government should speak to these poor fellows, they don't understand, etc., etc., are they saying, stick to the laws, enforce them. So I think that it's a very delicate and fragile situation, but you have a government in power that delights in devastating the delicate and fracturing the fragile. It's their way of functioning. So I'm very, very frightened, very worried about how, incidentally, though, you know that Punjab's Olympians, its leading athletes, are planning to return their medals to the state, their Commonwealth golds and their national gold medals to the state on December 5, if the issue is not resolved by that date. So you're seeing a second award wapasi. A man like Mr. The veteran Badal, old man Badal, today returned his Padma Vibhushan. The government is not getting it, and the corporate media and elite are not getting it. The sense of grievance and the sense of betrayal that is there now in these farmers. And you're still not willing. There were many other things that you could have done. In 2018,
Mm.
2 lakh farmers gathered from 22 states and 4 union territories in Delhi.
Yes.
Not only with these demands, and by the way, that blows apart the idea that it's only Punjab farmers. Farmers came from 21 other states, also supporting those demands, 2 of which were a bills in parliament, etc. At that time, the forum of which I'm associated with, called Nation for Farmers, gave about 8 or 10 things that would have seen a very different public discourse, a very different farming situation, which is what the farmers have now asked for: a special session of parliament. A special session of parliament. At that time, I said 3 weeks. I'm now saying it's got to be a full session of parliament, because you've got all other sections also affected by this. And that one of the instruments of that special session of parliament should be a thorough discussion of the Swaminathan Commission and implementation of its report, which both the Congress UPA and the BJP NDA committed themselves to before elections.
I come back to the Swaminathan Commission report because there was, like we had talked about in the past, this government had put an affidavit before the Supreme Court saying that a lot of the aspects of that Swaminathan Committee report just cannot be implemented. It's not viable. Are these laws a way of just sidestepping everything that was recommended in that committee report, saying, hey, these are our farm law reforms? We're not actually going by what the Swaminathan Committee recommended.
What the government gave an affidavit about was about a single recommendation.
Right.
It was on the single recommendation of MSP, which Dr. Swaminathan and in his commission said should be cost of production plus 50%. Now, that same government had 4 months earlier in the election promised that it would implement that within 12 months of coming to power. It then goes back to the court. It then goes to the court saying, not possible, not feasible, it would distort market prices. The whole exercise is not only to evade the Swaminathan Commission. The entire exercise is to shift. The entire way we're functioning is to shift the state from a welfarist interventionist state to a market-led, corporate-led state. And the Swaminathan Commission says extremely important things beyond MSP. It's talking about climate change, climate resilience. It's talking about the mega water crisis that is in India and how to go about dealing with it in farming. Your life and mine are pretty tied to what the problems are that are identified in that report. It's much bigger than MSP. So here you are looking at exactly what the government is doing. It is just completely it's one more milestone on the highway to agrarian hell, where you hand over Indian agriculture to the corporations. That's been a process of 2 decades now. It's intensifying.
There was a lot of questioning on social media and on the media itself about, oh, these probably aren't really farmers. But you just said in a press conference today that it's time for the non-farmers also to come in. We've seen labor unions now join this protest. Obviously, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a farmer in order to stand up for farmers' rights. We've seen several people. I mean, that argument itself is faulty. But do you believe, and why do you believe that it's time for non-farmers also to join in?
The same reason I said that we need to have a special session of parliament to discuss these issues. I have argued for 4 years now that what we call the agrarian crisis, and by the way, please go back to the early 2000s and see who introduced that phrase into the media. For a long time, I've been saying the agrarian crisis has gone way beyond the agrarian. Okay. It has become a societal crisis, perhaps even a civilizational crisis, with the largest body of small farmers, smallholders on earth, fighting for their survival. And it's not just about a loss of production, production kitna gir gaya, output kitna gir gaya. It's also about how much insaniyat kitni gir gayi, how much our humanity has been lost, that we as a society have accepted the death by suicide of 330,000 farmers, and we haven't been to where, Faye, is our outreach? Yes. Where is our outreach? Yeah. And so, as I said, now look at the legal provisions being brought in. Rather than we stand by the farmers, what has happened is the farmers are standing up for us. The farmers are fighting laws and the dismantling of the right of the citizen to legal recourse. The farmers are fighting a future hunger situation because there is no doubt. Okay, let's take two things, which the establishment experts are saying. If the corporations come in and the market is open, farmers will get much better prices because Mukesh Bhai is not going to give a lower price than the local sahukar, right? Yeah. If this is so, if it is so that the corporations are guaranteeing better prices than MSP, then where lies the problem in passing a law on the MSP? Because it's anyway going to be lower than what you're giving. Mm-hmm. The very fact that you're resisting that like hell tells you the truth about why you are resisting. That's one thing. The second, just look at the situation in rural India. A new paper just out 2 months ago in the journal Food Policy, and based entirely on Government of India data, shows us this. Say 63.3% of rural Indians, many of whom are farmers, by the way, 63.3% of rural Indians cannot afford a basic nutritious diet, even if they spend 100% of their income on that. Even if they spend every single paisa they earn, with no money on health, education, rent, transportation, commuting, nothing, school uniforms for their kids. If they didn't spend any of that and just spent it on food, it means 520 million human beings still can't afford a basic nutrition diet. Now, I think it's very reasonable to say that any human being spends at least 1/3 to half of her or his income on non-food items, right? Your health, your education, your rent, etc. But even if the rural Indian paid only 1/3 of their income, 1/3 of their income towards non-food items, even then, it would be, something like, 76%. Yeah, it would be 76% who still cannot afford a nutritious diet. Okay? It would be 63% if they spent 100%, 63% would be left without it. And even if they spent 1/3, still people would not have a nutritious diet.
I want to take you back to the MSP point that you were making. We have our agriculture minister, Mr. Tomar, who has said, and I quote, 2 days ago, just yesterday he said it, in fact, MSP is not part of the new farm laws. There's no question of doing away with that system. The fear that the farmers have that MSP will go away is not true. We also have the Prime Minister speaking 2 days ago at Varanasi, where he said the promise of delivering 1.5 times MSP to farmers has been fulfilled, not just on paper, but also in their bank accounts. What is your response to these two statements?
Okay, let's take the Prime Minister's thing about it's been fulfilled. The MSP being fulfilled within 12 months of coming to power. In 2015, they told the courts it's not possible, it would distort market prices. In 2016, they denied that they had ever made such a promise. Radha Mohan Singh, the then agriculture minister. 2017, they said, we have a much better model in Madhya Pradesh with Shivraj Singh Chauhan ji, who just happened to shoot dead 5 farmers through his policeman in Mandsaur. In 2018, Mr. Nitin Gadkari came out with the most honest statement on the subject. He said, "Are yaar, everybody makes promises before an election." Okay. In 2019, Mr. Arun Jaitley in budget speech, paragraphs 13 and 14 said, "We have already fulfilled it in the Rabi Vibha." This is based, and I think that we need to be explanatory here for your audience.
Yes, please.
This is based on playing games with the word cost of production. Cost of production plus 50%. So how you define the cost of production? There are many different ways of addressing the cost of production. What was Swaminathan's and what is the government's? There are 3 essential ways, though there are probably 50, but 3 essential ways that officials look at what is cost of production. One is A2, which is just input costs, nothing. Just the paid out costs on inputs and nothing else. A2. So, and I will tell you exactly what that works out to in rupees. The second way of measuring cost of production is A2 plus FL, family labor. So it's the input cost plus imputed costs of family labor. Swaminathan's suggestion has, and I think that they're not going to find any expert more distinguished than Dr. M.S. Swaminathan among the scientists. His thing was comprehensive cost of production, rental value of land, interest on the loan, the water costs, all the entire comprehensive cost of production. That is cost of production. And by the way, is there any industry in the world that does not function on that basis?
So if I may please stop you for 1 second, just to explain to our audience, when you say input for farm, you're talking about seeds, you're talking about fertilizer, talking about pesticide. This is something the farmer has to go pay money and buy with every crop that he sows. Yes. So that's just plain old input. But then, in a farming family, the entire family works in the field. The entire family, barring none, work in the field. And so there is a cost to that labor as well. If they were working in somebody else's field, they would get paid a wage. Correct. It is that wage that's going into their farm. And of course, any other labor that they hire, that's also an input cost. Machines that they hire to harvest, all of that is input cost. But remember that they take loans to buy the seeds and fertilizers. And there is an interest ticking on that loan, which is also a cost. They might have rented the land that they're tilling. And so there is a rent on that land. If it's their own land, had they rented it out to someone else, there would be an income that they would get from that land. So what the Swaminathan Committee had recommended is that all these things be taken into consideration when calculating that minimum price that they should get for their crop. Now, that is what the problem. That's the difference is where the problem is.
Let's apply that to wheat and see what you would get. At least the last time we looked at this, when this stuff was going on, 2017, 1800. A particular variety of wheat under the first just input cost would have cost some 500 to 520 rupees. Under A2 plus FL, include input cost plus family labor, that would come to 800 something rupees.
Yes.
Under the Swaminathan formula, it would come to 1200 plus rupees. Now you add 50% to each of these and you see how many hundreds of rupees the farmer is losing. So that is one thing. And by the way, this was what the government has been doing.
Yes.
Is mostly A2 plus FL. Okay. And the price difference can be 400 rupees per quintal.
So to also answer the argument that a lot of people will say is open free market. If you have a free market, that's how every business functions. You sell your product in the free market. and based on what price the market gives you, that's your business viability. But there's a problem here of the fact that farmers cannot regulate their output based on demand. They sow a certain amount and that's the amount that grows. And a lot of times, if there's a bumper crop and there are too many tomatoes, the price of tomatoes crash. And so now they're being punished for growing more. Also, the argument that someone just put, and I want to read this out, Anirudh says government doesn't legalize MSP because of inflation. If the government gives a higher MSP, will this result in inflation? Will it result in higher food prices in the cities? This is the question, Mr. Sainath. Mr. Sainath.
You have a National Food Security Act. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that banish the idea, and please let Anirudh look for a country where there is no state intervention in agriculture. This is about your food. You are being subsidized. Okay? The farmer doesn't get to set his price or her price. Yeah. The farmer doesn't get to set. And by the way, I question the entire idea of this free market. I'd love to meet one. Reliance and Adani are operating in a free market. They're operating in a market where every measure is taken with their interests in consideration, where every move, closure, opening is taken in the way an organization called BSNL was never allowed to compete in the market. And by the way, as a rural reporter, I will tell you that the only damn phone service that worked in every corner of the country was BSNL. And that's why I've always had one additional BSNL phone, which doesn't work in the cities. But all these were destroyed. If there was a real free market there, none of your telecom giants would be able to compete with the BSNL. The earlier BSNL was sold off to the Tatas for 1,800 crores with all the properties and real estate of BSNL handed over to the Tatas. And a company was sold for 1,800 crores, which had a cash balance of 3,600 crores. Okay. So I would love to meet this free market. Mm-hmm. And the idea with the farmer, I again come back to this thing. Show me the country. The United States, 2018 subsidy for agriculture, and theirs is not farmers. It's really about incorporated businesses. It's really for corporations. $90 billion, something like that. Okay. Now, I want Anirudh to look at the global markets in cotton when we had that huge wave of suicides around cotton. Okay. In 2006, the United States subsidy for cotton was $2 billion higher than the total value of its cotton production. Than the total value of its cotton production. Now, all our subsidies are minimal, minuscule, and Vijay Zavandia, India's one of our leading agrarian intellectuals, put it so beautifully when a young, at that time they were giving, it worked out that the subsidy per cow in the United States and Europe, $3 per cow per day. And Vijay Javandia asked, what is the dream of the Indian farmer? He replied, the dream of the Indian farmer is to be born a European cow, because that is the most food secure creature in the world, and it gets more subsidies in a month than I get in a year. Okay. So, I also want to bring you here to this idea of, one, you have a class of people. We say, hey, they don't pay income tax. They are being taxed. Their price is set for them. Okay. And they pay all the other indirect taxes that you and I do, because farmers are also consumers. 75% of farmers in this country are also net purchasers of food grain on the market. So you've got to have you need to make the right to food universal. Then you'd have to make that, and you have to accept. And I'm saying, I still want to see that country which is not. You're investing in your life to get that kind of situation. So where also, what does the farmer earn in this country? Please ask Anirudh to look at that figure of what farmers earn. The last data, large tranche of data we have, because the government of India, Mr. Modi's government, killed the 2018 data. The last data we have is 2013. An average farm household in this country, 5 people. This is not individual. An average farm household in this country earns 6,426 rupees a month, $85, from all sources, of which agriculture is 62%. And then they go and work as wage labor from all sources. Now, if you take the household size as 5, that's about 1,300 rupees per capita. Now, this is where your rural India is. This is where your farmer is. Rich farmer, as they say. The farmers of Punjab are best described as relatively less worse off.
Yes.
You can go and look at the numbers.
And, our audience should also know there are Oxfam reports on poverty in our country that show us that while earning 6,000 rupees a month for a family of 5, one bout of illness for a member in the family bankrupts that entire family. Yeah. Somebody needs heart surgery, someone has cancer, someone has kidney failure in that family. That's it. They've sold the land, they've sold any valuables that they have, and it bankrupts them. Compare that to the security that we get in our corporate jobs to some extent, because we have savings. Savings is the most important thing, something to fall back on in hard times. And there is a lot of this information available on the internet. Like I keep asking you every day, our duty as citizens really is to read as much as possible, because the more you read, the better informed, better able you are to make decisions and make up your mind as a citizen on these matters. We have a question from Abraham Abhishek, who says, have labor unions and Kisan unions weakened over the years? Earlier, we saw many union leaders come into mainstream politics, not as many now representing farmers and labor in mainstream politics.
Unions across the board have been demonized and gutted for 25 years now. I'd like to tell Abraham that applies equally to journalist unions. Faye, if I could do the things that I did in journalism, it was because I was a member of a very strong journalist union and a nationwide movement of journalists. It provided the greatest source of my protection, insurance, and independence. That if I was victimized where I worked, it could lead to a clash where 5,000 journalists across the country did a pen down strike. It could do that. That disappeared when we casualized journalist labor, when we replaced tenured employment with contract employment. Now, when you are on an 11-month contract, as one journalist asked me many years ago at the time of the paid news scandal, he said, I'm in the 8th month of my 11-month contract. I've got my mother in hospital, 2 kids in university, 1 kid looking for a job, and I'm paying 3 EMIs, 30,000 on my house, 20,000 on vehicle loan, 20,000 on loan for my kid to study abroad. Now tell me, the editor calls me in and says, you're going to put your name on this interview with this cabinet minister, don't bother. You can improve it, of course, but it's already been done by a PR agency. He said, do you want me to be a hero? Yeah. The unions were smashed by casualization. Now that has been embedded. Please, in all the talk about the farmers, don't forget the laws that have been imposed on the working class immediately after the opposition walked out. Those laws were passed without a single vote against. So unions are extremely important for our independence, for our protection, not just for farmers and workers, but for journalists. And I don't know what profession Abraham is in, but if you have the living standards you do, Abraham, it's because for the past 100 years, unions fought for minimum wages, for minimum standards, and they fought for an 8-hour day. It was the working class that fought and achieved the 8-hour working day. The only strength that the poor have is their collective bargaining power. So if you smash unions, and that's what the whole, look at the new labor laws, they make it impossible for unions to function.
We have Anirudh Sabu who's come back to say, I didn't mean to offend Mr. Sainath.
No,
I
no.
was asking reasons why MSP has not been legalized in our country.
Okay, so I'll clarify. Anirudh, I never took any offense. I get angry at the damn issue. I get angry at the damn issue because we are all, you see, the thing is, we are socialized by our media, by what we see in the newspapers, by what we see in the channel. Today, already the second round of propaganda has begun, showing a story lionizing the new law, the prosecution of one trader under the new law. Okay. Oh, wow. Huh? So this is why we need the law. So that kind, the MSP is why the MSP is not legalized. I also want to tell you, Anirudh, just legalizing the MSP won't solve your problem if you don't have procurement guaranteed along with the MSP. The difference between, and I'm very glad you raised that question, Anirudh, because it's one of the differences between Punjab, Haryana, and the rest of the country. In Punjab, Haryana, the farmers being organized, having strong unions, having strong striking power, were able to ensure that the procurement system worked better for them than it did in the rest of the country. So yet another reason, going back to Abraham, of why you need strong organized unions.
Right. So basically, just to put that simply, it means that if I were to announce to you that, hey, you know what, this year I'm going to be paying 100 rupees per kg of rice, and then never buy any rice at all, it makes absolutely no difference to anybody. So procurement is as important as announcing the MSP. You can announce the MSP, to kingdom come, but if you don't actually use it and don't buy anything, or you buy only half as much or a quarter as much as you committed, it will make no difference to the farmers who are waiting for it. And I just want to
Maharashtra, yes. In Maharashtra, where you and I are now sitting, we perfected this game of opening procurement centers late, yes. 10 days, opening half the number that were required, closing them 10 days early. Each such action forced the farmer to sell to private trade at much lower prices.
Which is why we've seen, and the other very bourgeois elitist thing to say is when we've seen visuals of farmers dumping milk on the highways, dumping produce on the highways, people write on social media, oh my God, what a waste of food. But you have to realize that for a farmer, every grain is his hard work. They would never dump anything unless they didn't need to desperately get your attention. And if you are saying what a waste of food, it means they have finally gotten your attention. And that's the only way you'll pay attention.
Exactly, because the farmers who dumped milk on the streets of Maharashtra in April, May, their price per liter had fallen from 32 rupees to 17 rupees. So your viewers should know that they were being paid for a liter of milk less than you and I pay for a bottled water, Bisleri or whatever brand it is. Yes. For a liter of water, we were paying more. And by the way, they got that liter of water for 5 paisa, 3 paisa a liter.
So I want to go back to something you said, because I know that I've heard a lot of urban arguments, and I call them urban arguments because, there are those people who've not experienced village life or agricultural life who say that, oh, there are rich farmers who are making a lot of money, who don't pay any tax, they get free electricity, and here they want, they want MSP, they want to be better looked after. Now, this is also bundling into this side argument which is a despicable argument, but oh, why are these farmers in Punjab who are at Delhi's border right now wearing jeans, speaking English, having, holding iPhones? They're obviously not real farmers. So there is an urban image of the fact that we expect farmers to wear torn dhotis and have no shoes on and look really weather worn. What is your response to that? Should there be different treatment of different kinds of farmers because we have so many different farmers in our country? Does that complicate the situation much further?
The first thing is, I don't see why the farmers or laborers are obliged to live up to our stereotypes. Yeah. Okay. Now, I grew up in a generation of journalists that really bought into the stereotype of Hollywood of the hard drinking, hard swearing, tie open, Humphrey Bogart journalist. Okay. And to this day, when I see anchors in three-piece suits, I somehow react very badly to it. It's also a question of our stereotypes and what we grew up on and what kind of ideas we had. So, incidentally, the wearing of those jeans, and I don't see, is the jean, are they wearing, what are the jeans that they're wearing? Many of them are made in your Gujarat and Surat things and exported abroad. And Faye, I get brilliant cotton shirts for 200 rupees off the streets of Fountain. They're all export rejects. Okay. So they have tiny flaws somewhere and they're going to be sold for $30, $20 overseas. Yeah. So I'm saying people have their own way of making up the kind of things they want. I personally have a huge problem with the clothing that farm laborers and farmers have adopted in farming because that has hurt and injured our weavers. You know, the first market of the weavers is the agricultural laborers, that soft white woven cloth. I would not advise you to work with your Benetton in 48 degrees heat. Okay. So, but
I just want to put this. I just want to put this to my audience, though.
The hell are we to tell them what?
I think it's. What do I think it's extremely elitist and also a little bigoted to assume that ambition and a taste for good things should be reserved only for those in the middle class and the upwardly mobile.
And I'm also.
I want our farmers to be able to live out their ambitions, to send their kids overseas, to be able to buy nice clothes and pay good school fees and dream of a better tomorrow, because that is when the profession will truly thrive. It is unfair for us to assume they will keep putting food on our plates without any personal return whatsoever. You want them to be poor and not have access to hospitals and not have access to good clothes and not be able to send their kids to college. That's a really unfair idea that we need to dismantle immediately.
And by the way, the bulk of them are not able to send their kids to college. And I gave you the numbers of what a farm household earns. Yeah. So just look at the latest data, the one report that this government has allowed publication of, because I think that they didn't understand the damaging numbers in it, since nobody ever reads what they publish. Online education. How many farmers' children have smartphones? How many rural children? Tell me how many girls below the age of 16 or 17 outside of Mumbai who own smartphones on which they can get their second, if they have that instrument, are they able to pay for Byju's or an academy or whatever it is, upgrade or downgrade or whatever it is? So the thing is, we are starting from a mythical premise that they're all very rich and well off. There are a tiny percentage of extremely rich people who call themselves farmers. Some of them have been your agriculture ministers. Okay. Now, it's in the same way if I say, hey, India has more billionaires than every country in the world except 3. Let's stop wasting our time on anti-poverty schemes. Yeah, we are number 4 in the world. It means we don't have poverty. So the idea that one tiny strata of farmers can be very rich is, you're extrapolating that across that entire class. And yes, there is a lot of stratification within farmers, but 85% of the holding.
My last question to you, Mr. Sainath, is this. If the impasse continues now on the 5th of December as well, and there is no clear outcome of conversation between government and farmers, what's likely to happen there? We heard today that farmer associations in Assam have said they will start moving to Delhi and to join the protest. Is that likely to happen? How do you assume this will play out?
I think if this were not the middle of the pandemic and the lockdowns and the more or less gutting of national level transportation, I think farmers groups from many other states would have left. And I see it's still very difficult for them to do that. That's why the All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee never asked farmers from other parts of the country to come to Delhi. They asked those from the neighboring states to come. And they asked other farmers to hold supporting or solidarity actions. Do your media even cover the fact that millions of workers went on strike on November 26th? Million. And those workers endorsed the demands of the farmers. That's when I said, now it's time for the rest of us to stand up and be counted. When the poorest workers, when poor working class is coming out in support of the farmers, and we are standing by, raising to ourselves questions and answers of the elite and the establishment, that's what will happen now. If this government had an iota of sincerity, it could have said, okay, we'll suspend the laws, withhold the implementation of the laws, we'll suspend them for the time of duration of our negotiations. They are again trying the same game, that they think they will wear them out. And they will create divisions. They'll say, they started telling the farmers who can be and who can't be on their delegation. Farmers are not telling the government who can be on their delegation. But the reason now is they're going to say, hey, we'll talk to the Punjab farmers. Others are not here. So they will look to create divisions. This is already the attempt. They will look to create divisions between the regions, the states, the leadership, the different organizations. And I think it will have a very, very dangerous, it'll open up a very dangerous scene. And I'm also saying, for the nth time, in answer to your last question, why, for me, one of the most moving moments in my life was in the city of Mumbai in March 12th, 2018, when 40,000 farmers walked 182 kilometers to Mumbai. I saw something that day in Mumbai I never credited Mumbai with. I saw students and teachers swarm into Azad Maidan to distribute food. I saw a businessman quietly from Crawford Market, a minority person, come quietly and deliver 1,000 pairs of chappals. And asked him, he wouldn't give his name. And when we asked him, why are you doing this? He said, I saw their bleeding feet on the road on TV and I wept. This should not be. These are the people who give us food. I had youngsters, maybe as young as your audience, final year law students or just graduated law students, come and ask me, please tell us what grounds we can file a PIL on against this government. Doctors of JJ Hospital, without being called, without being mobilized, landed up there, opened counter and started treating the women whose feet were bleeding. Okay, that day I saw doctors come in for farmers, teachers come in for farmers, students come in for farmers, bank employees, insurance employees, railway employees come in for farmers. That day I saw a nation for farmers. And that's where that is the organization, that's the forum. It's for people like you and me who are not farmers. Yeah, it has no hierarchies and no, nothing else. It's about people concerned about our fellow citizens and understanding the depth of damage that this crisis ongoing of inequality has caused in agriculture, that it affects all of us.
Mr. Sainath, thank you so much for spending time with us. I'm going to leave it there, but I keep reiterating to our audience, the best thing you can do right now, the easiest thing you can do right now is read about it. Read as much as you can get your hands on. You don't have to be convinced by anyone. If you agree with Mr. Sainath's point of view or you disagree with it, then I have done my job, because it's made you think about it. You're going to read about it. You're going to ask questions, which is your democratic right and duty. The next thing to do, if you happen to be in Delhi or thereabouts, if you want to visit the farmers as they protest at the borders, take blankets with you, take extra sweaters, pairs of socks, mufflers, food. Fresh vegetables is what they need. They need produce, they need milk. If you can carry that with you, that would be great. Take some medicines. Most of them, like Mr. Sainath pointed out, are in their 60s and their 70s, which means they will need the regular medicines that our parents take, maybe blood pressure, diabetes, that sort of thing. Normal medicines. Go take a look at what people might need and what you can do in the service of the farmers. This is our duty as and as our right as citizens. And for those who believe that these are not really farmers and they're being sort of misled, go meet them. No one's stopping you from meeting them. It's a democratic, perfectly open space. Avoid the police and go meet them in their tractors, have a conversation with them, find out where they're from, find out what they want, why they're here. And of course, like I keep saying, there are farmers within a 20-kilometer radius in any of our cities. You can always drive out and meet the farmers outside your own city and find out what they're going through and what their life is like and what their challenges are right now. Answer your own questions. We continue to track what's going on with the farmers, and we'll bring you updates. Remember, talks have fallen through, no conclusion as of now. Another round of talks will happen on the 5th. In the meantime, it's 11 degrees in Delhi, and farmers are sitting outdoors. And they're planning to do it for many, many more days to come. Thanks for watching.